Hello, here we are at Big Henry, and one of our wonderful viewers asked a question about Henry's tires and what kind and are they original? Well, they certainly aren't original. Henry was built in 1945, and when we received him in the early 2000s, the tires were certainly old, but they weren't World War II vintage, and we invested in new rubber for him. The scary thing is he has split rims, and those can be very dangerous around people who don't know how to handle split rim tires. Think Hiroshima-style explosions. So we're very careful about that. But someone asked what kind of tires, and just to make sure that our investment in expensive truck tires stays good, we keep these UV covers on them, but that hasn't kept some of the deterioration from already starting in. So I can tell you from looking at these are Destron 7.50-15 tires, regroovable. Oh, that's interesting to know. And they were made in Thailand. And that's interesting given the fact that we were sinking junks off Thailand. In fact, the person who made these tires for Big Henry, maybe one of their ancestors were on a junk that we sunk on our last patrol. So Destron, D-E-S-T-R-O-N-E, Destron from Thailand. Huh, I would have thought they would have been Firestones or Goodyears, given the fact that Akron's just a few minutes down the road. So, but regardless, we want to keep these tires in good shape. They just got a good workout today, which we're recording this on the day before Veterans Day. Cleveland did its Veterans Day parade on Friday, and Big Henry was our float in the parade. And maybe Evan can insert a little B-roll of Henry in the parade. But so there are, there are 6 tires. We've got doubles on the forward axle, and then the rear axle, these are single tires. So we've got to buy 6 tires at a time. And certainly it's we don't skimp on Big Henry because he's out and about in the city. So hopefully that will answer that question. What's next? And we're back up here on Codd's Bridge for another question. We were pointing out the bullet hole on one of our very first episodes, and there it is. Someone asked about this wrench here, this structure right here. I am told that this is part of our main air induction. Under the after gun mount is a 36-inch diameter mushroom valve, and I'm told that this is used to service or work on that giant valve. Now, what I want to know is what went here and was held down by that. Obviously, another type of wrench, which is currently lost to us. So it's interesting up here. We just discovered our propeller key recently, but this is obviously something to investigate and find out what this was and where we can get one. Now, another viewer, in fact, a whole bunch of viewers were questioning our urine relief tube here and the strange shape. Well, the blueprints don't include a lock nut, so this can turn, and the brilliance of that is obvious. This is a very confined space, and you're moving through here. You don't want to have this thing out or you might bump into it, but if you need to use it, you can turn it, and look how convenient that is. Or depending on your aim, maybe that's more convenient. And then when you're not using it, again, keeping it so it doesn't intrude into the walkway. But it's captive, but it doesn't have a lock nut. So that's what we know about that. And of course, we'll talk about this maybe on another program, but this is where a life ring went. One of our other viewers asked a very good question about Molotov cocktails. The fleet submarines were tasked with destroying the junks that were supporting the Japanese island forces in the South China Sea. And so that required some creativity on the part of the submarine crews. We have torpedoes and we have big caliber deck guns, but they're not really designed to sink an 80-foot wooden sailing ship. So again, the crews were given wide latitude to experiment and come up with a good way to get these junks either completely burning and or sunk on the bottom as quickly as possible. So some of the boats, including Wahoo under Dudley Walker Morton, used Molotov cocktails. Now, he was running patrols up until, sadly, they were lost in October of '43. So he was probably an early experimenter with the junk weapons. So basically, they got probably beer bottles or maybe glass transfusion bottles, filled them with mixtures of gasoline and other things with rags. I mean, I don't need to tell you how to make a Molotov cocktail, but they made Molotov cocktails to try to get these junks or small sampans burning very quickly. Now, after Wahoo was lost in '43, there really wasn't a whole lot of call for junk weaponry until the summer of '45, when virtually all of the boats in the South China Sea were sent on junk missions. And in addition to the other weapons, I know some boats carried bazookas, rocket-launched grenades, the grenade launcher on a Garand. But then they came back with the Molotov cocktails. Again, get the junk burning, get it on the bottom as quickly as possible, because you're often in shallow water, too shallow for a big sub like a fleet boat to dive. And that is your main source of protection, particularly when a Japanese plane shows up unexpectedly. So, I'm not sure it's YouTube friendly to give a demonstration on making Molotov cocktails. But, check with any college kid, especially if they're in radical groups. They can show you how to do that. Let's see. Evan, another viewer, wanted to know about Admiral Flucky. Well, the fleet boats around the country were more or less, each one had its patron saint admiral. I know Pampanito was incredibly blessed and honored to have a close relationship with Dick O'Kane, Medal of Honor winner, former commander of the Tang. I know Rayquin, USS Rayquin in Pittsburgh, had a very close relationship with Slade DeVille Cutter, her first captain, when he was alive. And here on COD, we were very, very lucky, very blessed to have known Admiral Flucky of the Barb. I had just read his book, Thunder Below, and I realized this guy is quite knowledgeable. He had a sister sub of CODs, and he was still alive. So I was able to literally call him one day at home, and we started a conversation, and we just hit it off, and we ultimately invited him to rechristen USS Cod as USS Cod Submarine Memorial on our commissioning anniversary, our 50th anniversary of our commissioning, which would have been June 21st, 1993. He flew to Cleveland. We got to meet the Admiral, again, Medal of Honor winner. And that started a tremendous relationship. Every year we would be in Annapolis, where he lived, and we would he would either make us dinner, or we would take he and his wife Margaret to brunch, and just hanging out at his house, spindrift, and listening to the incredible stories, and being able to pick his brain. My only regret is I didn't have this camera here and really record that. Maybe we couldn't do that because it would change the dynamic. We were just very good friends. I was a curator, EXO, at the time, and my director, Dr. Fakin, he and I just really cherished those meetings and meals, hanging out with the Admiral. I know Evan's going to insert some great snapshots that we have that we're very proud of Admiral and his wife wearing their COD jerseys, sweatshirts in and around Annapolis. I would say the two things, having been a close friend of his, and in fact, the greatest honor I had was scrubbing his toilet. We knew him for probably about 12 years before he succumbed to Alzheimer's, but on one of the later visits, we were helping maintain his house for him, and it ended up, after all the other repair jobs were completed, he was being pestered by the hard water stains in the toilet off his study. So I got the honor of tackling that job with the Admiral there, and it's story for another time. But whenever we get into this kind of a competition as to how well we knew a certain celebrity, or in this case Admiral Flucky, I generally win by saying that I scrubbed his toilet with him present and helping, and not too many people can top that story. But I do want to say, having been a friend of his, he didn't like the term, the nickname Lucky Flucky. As he often said, I didn't leave anything to luck. I calculated the probabilities of everything I did, and if it was better than 50-50 that we'd get home safe, then I went with it. But he left nothing to luck. Again, a very professional, calculating all the parameters, all the odds, and then acting upon it. So again, leaving nothing to luck. He didn't like the term Lucky Flucky. So let's keep that in mind. Just as you certainly wouldn't call Dudley Morton or Captain Morton Mush Morton, because that was a derisive term given to him by the Academy upperclassmen, and they could get away with it, but no one else could. So we don't say Mush Morton; we say Captain Morton or Dudley Walker Morton. Because we don't want to have him beat us up. And speaking of beating up, one of our viewers, a real miscreant, wanted to know who would win in a theoretical fight between me and Ryan Zemansky. And I got to tell you, Ryan's a dear friend. I really respect him and his work with the battleship. He is he's half my age, and he's certainly in good shape, and I'm not in the best of shape. But I will say this: if it was a bar fight, no way is he going to win, simply because my old age and experience would win out over his youth and vigor. I'm the kind of guy that will, before the first punch is thrown, I will gouge his eyeballs out. If it's a Marquess of Queensberry boxing match, no thank you, I'm not going to do that. At my age, the only thing I fear is Libby, his YouTube manager. She scares me. That is a crazy woman. And in fact, I understand she killed a man in Tijuana in a bar fight. So, I respect Libby, and I would not cross her. Hopefully that settles that question. This cod was built in and launched in 1943. In those days, the Navy had a policy of dry docking the boats every couple of years, major ships. But submarines were unique. They were in the thick of battle. They got depth charged frequently. So cod would have come back from a war patrol, and let's face it, if your pit sword gets ripped off, or your sound heads are damaged, or you're suffering some shaft squealing or bending because of depth charging, you're going to go into dry dock. So as to the frequency of cod's wartime dry docking, without actually checking the deck logs, I can probably say that she saw a short dry docking. It's possible she was dry docked after every patrol, but just to fix whatever damage might have been incurred during the previous war patrol. Now, I know she's dry docked extensively at Mare Island from November 44 to January of 45 for her refit. So that's going to include some dry docking and fitting out pier work. She certainly got dry docked again in 1946 when she's put into mothballs for long-term storage. So she and a Baleo class boat are dry docked in the Boston Navy Yard, 2 in 1. She is then dry docked again in 51 to reactivate her for Cold War service. She probably may have gotten a dry docking for some voyage repairs at some point in her Cold War service from 51 to 54. And then we know she was in dry dock in late 53, early 54 for her second mothballing. And that was done again in Boston Navy Shipyard. And then she's returned to the reserve fleet. And then in 1959, she's taken out of the reserve fleet and brought to Cleveland to serve as a reserve training boat. Now, there were some modifications made to her mothball condition so that she could run an engine. So that would have required another quick dry docking. Again, dry docking, not working on the entirety of the hull, but just getting her dry up on the blocks to perform a specific task and maybe inspect how things were looking. So 1959, prior to her tow to Cleveland, she was dry docked to open the sea chest to run number 4 main engine and the auxiliary. Now, she arrives in Cleveland in 1959 and serves as a reserve training boat. Again, she's not leaving the dock without props. She's just running engines and letting reservists train aboard, but she's not going anywhere. And then she was dry docked a final time by the Navy in 1963 in Lorraine Shipyard. We have no documentation. We're still searching as to what was done to her in the dry docking in 1963. My gut feeling is probably not a whole lot of work. Hopefully we will insert the one photo we have of cod in the AM shipyard in Lorraine, because you don't want to look at my face answering this question. So that was 63, and then we jump ahead 58 years until her last dry docking, which there's some whole great pictures we'll insert. But now we, being her civilian owners, we took cod to the Don John shipyard in Erie, Pennsylvania, from June to August of 2021 for a pretty extensive overhaul and dry docking in their wonderful shipyard. And knock on wood, that should hold us for about at least 20 years. And that cost us a cool $1 million. Now, I know Ryan is looking at a whole lot more money for dry docking battleship New Jersey. But that's why we're very thankful that we only have a submarine to worry about. Another good question comes from a viewer who asked, why are submarines called boats? That's a very good question. And of course, the first submarines commissioned in the Navy in the aughts of the 20th century, boats like the Holland boat and Adder and what was some of those early ones? Anyway, those A-class, B-class, C-class boats weren't much more than 50, 60, 70 feet long. And of course, they were considered for harbor defense and to travel any distance from the manufacturer to where you wanted them to patrol or where they'd be stationed. They weren't big enough to travel long distances. So they had to be hauled out of the water and placed on the deck of a ship. And in naval nomenclature, anything that you haul up out of the water and swing over and place on the deck of a ship is a boat. So the early submarines were small, short-ranged. They didn't have, they couldn't navigate open oceans very effectively. So they had to be hauled on the decks of ships, and they were boats. Now, they grew. Each class and succeeding class was bigger and bigger than the last. And I think by about 1914, so 14 years into their lives, we have classes of boats, the K-class boats, which have enough long leg capability. They can transit the Atlantic, but the tradition developed to call them boats just because. Now, as an adjunct to that, some people will call fleet subs pigboats, and that's really wrong. The pigboats were the submarines prior to the fleet boats. The large O, R, and S class boats were considered pigboats because they were not very commodious. Now, why were they called pigboats? Nobody really understands the exact reason, but there's some theories. One is that because these older class boats, when they would be alongside their tender, I'm going to use my hand here. This is the tender. They would moor perpendicular like that. These are the little subs. So they looked like piglets suckling from the mama pig, the sow. So the pigboats. That's one very good reason I tend to go with that. Also, the fact that those poor sailors didn't have the fresh water and the shower and laundry facilities that the big fleet boats that came along in the mid-late 30s had. So those guys really lived a life of deprivation, and they were generally not very... they didn't smell good. The sailors were rather dirty at times. So they called those, that was another reason or another theory as to why they were called pigboats. But the pigboats were basically the R-class, O-class, and S-class boats. Now, when the war broke out, I think one or two R boats did make a patrol on the coasts. The S-classes were still very much in the submarine inventory. So well into the war, the S-boats were making patrols, and they certainly got a lot of upgrades. But the fleet submarine is the preferred weapon of submarine warfare for the U.S. Navy in World War II. But it wasn't until 1943 that enough of the big fleet boats become available that they can relegate the S-boats to training, as of course the R and O class boats. Those World War I era construction subs were used primarily for training new submariners. So a lot of the O boats and R boats were used to train submariners, and those certainly were pigboats. For whatever reason they were called pigboats, those are pigboats. The fleet submarine being the giant ocean liner comparatively to these earlier class of boats. These were real game changers with their built-in air conditioning and the distilling plants that in World War II at least, particularly with the improved Badger stills that show up aboard the fleet boats in 44 to replace the earlier Kleinschmidt distilling plants, they could certainly produce enough fresh water that the crewmen could do laundry and even wash the ship's laundry, the tablecloths and your condensate water from the air conditioning was additional water that could be used by the crew for laundry. So hopefully that's a good description why we call them pig boats.